Good evening. Let me first start by asking you a few questions about some of your observations, your personal observations of PowerPoint presentations. If you were to say stuff that annoys you about PowerPoint presentation, what would it be? Too much text? Small fonts?
Useless animation.
Useless animations?
People reading right from the text.
People reading from the slides? Yes.
Blank one color backgrounds with one color text and that's it, and you're like, well, wow, that doesn't add a lot.
Okay, the colors on the slides. Yes?
Too many slides.
Too many slides, okay.
Too
Great.
much on one slide.
Too much on one slide. Maybe that's a final point?
Speakers distracted by their own slides.
Speakers distracted by their own slides, probably because they're reading them. So there's an author by the name of David Parody, who made a survey, an annoying PowerPoint survey is what he calls it. And he's done it for several years. The last one that he made was last year. And in his survey, he asked 602, or actually he received 602 responses to his survey. And in the responses he asked, or in the question he asked, what are the top 3 annoyances that you have of PowerPoint slides? And I think we resumed a lot of them here. First one, speaker reads the slides, and that's 74%. In other words, 74% of the respondents, they said that among the top 3 annoyances, speakers reading the slides was one of them. And then there are sentences, instead of bullet points being used, text that's too small to read, slides that are hard to see, probably because of the color aspect that this gentleman was talking about. And finally, complex diagrams, just too complicated to follow. So what I will try to do this evening is try to give you some of the tips and pointers that can help you avoid being part of these statistics. But first, you might have some questions for me. You might be asking yourselves, how much do I need to know PowerPoint myself? What sort of PowerPoint skills do I need to have? Or you might say, what sort of graphic design skills do I need to have? Or I can see some of you, do I need to take notes? So let me go through one of those, each point one by one. PowerPoint skills. Do you feel that for this presentation you'll need a little or a lot of skills?
A little.
A little. Graphic design skills. Do you think that you need to have good graphic design skills to present properly?
No.
Exactly. No. And finally, do I need to take notes?
Not yet.
Well, in fact, you'll be happy to know that you don't need to take notes because this workshop is actually being filmed, and we will have the workshop put up online on our club's website. So the one note that you need to take is this link, www.toastmastersmontreal.com. And actually what I invite you to do is, if you'd like to, write me your email address, your name and your email address. I'll keep that. And then as soon as we've had a chance to put the video up online, I'll send you an email to let you know that it's up online. How does that sound?
Great.
Super. So let's get on with the show. 3 aspects that I'm going to cover to help you get the skills to present properly are the following. Structure. How to put structure into your presentation. The other one is visual appeal. How to make your slides visually appealing. And the third skill is something that we all possess, are how to use our Toastmasters skills when presenting. So, structure your presentation. Structure your presentation. I'm going to cover several aspects. One of them is a roadmap. You need to have a roadmap when you make your presentation. You need to have focus when you prepare your presentations. You need to find ways to simplify. You need to find ways to guide the audience. And for roadmap, 2 points that I want to cover. One of them is start from the end and how to get there. In other words, when you're making your PowerPoint presentation, don't start by saying, okay, this is everything that I have and how do I put this into my presentation? No, instead, tell yourselves, what do I want the audience to get from my presentation? What action do I want them to take at the end of my presentation? Where do I want to bring them? And make that your endpoint, and then structure your presentation for everything that you need from the beginning to the end to get to the end. So that's what you really need to do. You need to focus on what the result is that you want for that presentation. The result for me is pretty clear. I want you all to feel more comfortable preparing your PowerPoint presentations, and everything that I'm doing now has been geared so that I can get you to that point. The second portion of a roadmap is in the structure of your presentations. Make sure that you follow 3 key rules. The first one is tell them what you're going to say. The second one is tell it to them. And the third one is tell them what you've said. When you do that, you get everyone in your audience to follow you on your path. I showed you this little image of a map. Well, that's exactly it. You've laid out the map in your head, but your audience doesn't know where you're going with it. So you need to guide them. You need to tell them, we're going to take a left turn here. We're going right. This is what we're doing. That's the roadmap that you need to establish in your presentation. Second point, focus. Focus. Slides are not documents. So when I mean focus, is I'm saying you should try to have 1 point per slide. And when I give you an example of slides not being documents, I'll give you an example of a presentation that people have probably seen over and over again. And I'll use myself as an example. So my name is Alex Chan. I'm an account manager at OpenText. We provide translation and localization services. We translate into different language pairs. You see some of those here on the slide. We work in different key industries. We have different file formats and technologies that we can work within. We can work in something as simple as Microsoft Word, or we can work on more complicated things such as working on flash animations for a website. So this is my slide. Did you follow everyone? Yes? Let's try to see how we can focus instead, because this is what it looks like to me when I see a slide like that. Right?
That's a good one.
1 point per slide. That's really the point of what you want to do. You want to try to focus on 1 point per slide. And the best suggestion that I can give for how to have 1 point per slide is use sticky notes. Sticky notes, something very simple. You have 1 point, another point, and you know what the advantage is of using sticky notes? You can't write that much into a sticky note, right? It only fits so much stuff, and that's exactly what you want to do for your PowerPoint presentation. And the good thing about sticky notes as well is you say, oh, it's better if I put it here. And oh no, actually it's better if I added something right here instead. That's the advantage of using sticky notes. For people here who are not extremely technically oriented, the advantage of sticky notes is that you don't get caught up in the technology, in PowerPoint. How do I do this? How do I do that? Your focus is really on the slides, the content, the information that you want to provide. And then the very, very last thing that you can do is sit down in front of the machine and actually create the slides out of these notes. So that is the biggest suggestion that I can give you this evening, is to use sticky notes. Focus. I talked about focus, and I showed you a slide that was not extremely focused. So how do we focus? How do we make sure that we can try to put 1 point per slide? Well, by doing something as simple as chopping, pruning. Chop, 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 chop. So let's give a makeover to my slide. This is a slide that you saw, and in that we can actually have different points. You can have the first point, which is who I am, where I work. The second point can be what language pairs, what is translation, what is it all about? The third point could be key industries that we service, and the final point could be the sort of various file formats that we work in. So that's the advantage of chopping down, is that instead of having one slide that contains all this information, you can start by saying, okay, let's focus on the first point. First point, Alex Chan, account manager. I help companies that need to make their products available in more than one language, and that need to do it efficiently and with high quality. That's as simple as that. translation services. Instead of having a lot of words, why not say, this is what translation services mean. You have a document, it's in English, you need it available in French. That's what we do. Or you might need it available in different languages. We do that as well. You can do that into French, into German, into Spanish, etc., etc. That's another slide that talks about one-point translation services. We also do localization services. So let's make one slide on localization services. What is localization? Localization is the translation portion, linguistic work, plus the technical work. The technical work, in other words, working on things like websites. So for example, this is a project that we're starting to work on. It's an English site, and the client wants to have this site also available in French. So what we would need to do is we would need to take the text on the images and then make sure that those texts can be converted into French, and that's what localization is. In other words, it's not just text that you're grabbing, but you also need to grab the image, work on the layer that has the text, do the translation, put the text back in. That's what localization is. Once again, one slide, one point. Adaptation. Localization also sometimes involves adaptations for target markets. For example, back to the English site, we have a slogan here, the future of vision and daylight control. But in French, instead of translating it in the same way, l'avenir et le contrôle, no. It's been translated, adapted for the market, au-delà des limites du vitrage, which means beyond the limits of glass glazing. So that's adaptation, and once again, what I've been doing is just chopping it up into one slide, one slide, one slide. Key industries. These are the key industries that we work on. I can actually, if I really wanted to go into into a lot more detail, I could chop it up and grab each of the industries and talk about each of the industries. But right now, you see that it's just one slide. File formats. Once again, just one slide. We work in Microsoft Office, we work on documents for print, and we also work on web technologies. And if I wanted to, I can chop it down further. I can say, well, Microsoft Office Suite, that involves Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Print publishing involves these sorts of applications. Web technologies involves this sort of technology as well. So we've taken this big, complex slide, we've chopped it up, we grabbed the important elements, and each of those elements went into a post-it, and each of those post-its became a slide. Simplify. I'll show you how complicated things can be, and then the advantage of using simplification by using a side-by-side comparison. Same thing, you have numbers. I'll show you some of the things that can be done for simplifying the display of numbers. And then finally, how to make your numbers meaningful. So, side-by-side comparison. You've probably seen slides like this. Results in 2011 versus 2010. Sales revenue increased by 5% compared to the previous year. Customer satisfaction decreased from 97.3% to 94.1%. Goals for 2012, we want to increase sales revenue by another 7%. And we want to bring customer satisfaction back up by 98%. This is a typical slide that you've probably seen. It provides the same information that I've verbally given, but what we can do is we can grab that information and try to do a side-by-side comparison. What do I mean by that? Very simple. You put things in different columns so that you can showcase the difference between one year, for example, and another year. Sometimes you might say, okay, my presentation, I always have to defend why our product is better than the competitors. Good. One column is our product, the other column is the competitor's product. But the fact that you do a side-by-side comparison lets people visually understand without having to have a long slide with a lot of text that you're going to be saying anyways. So hopefully you see the difference between something that's complex and something that's been simplified. In the same way, simplifying numbers. You've probably seen reports like this, monthly revenue, chopped up or detailed by month, and every month you have the very interesting or important information, but there are ways to simplify this. Something as simple as saying, well, do we really need, for the purpose of the presentation, do we really need to know all that information, all the details? Perhaps we can just simplify it. Take these big numbers, and instead of, I'll go back to the previous slide, instead of having 9,244,290, well, maybe something as simple as 9.2 million will do the trick. So this is what you can do with your presentations. Try to find ways to simplify them. Look for information and tell yourselves, is this information that relevant, or can I condense, simplify, and make it easier for the audience to understand? Last point regarding simplification is make your numbers meaningful. You probably recognize this gentleman, Steve Jobs, Apple. This was a picture that was taken in 2001. That was 11 years ago, practically, where he was announcing the release of the iPod, the very first iPod. And the iPod, you probably know, is a sort of a MP3 player, a music player that you can listen to your music with. What some people could have done in presenting this information is they could have said, this little device holds 5 gigabytes of information. Does anyone know? Does that mean something to you, 5 gigabytes of information? How about this? 5 gigabytes of information means 1,000 songs, CD quality, 1,000 songs that you can have in your little device that you can put in your pocket. And that is how you make numbers meaningful. You take a number and you find some sort of way to make it understandable by your audience. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, well, I have a number, and this is how big it is, and that's the same thing as the size of 10 football fields. Well, people who have seen football fields will probably understand what that number means. And that's exactly what you want to do. You want to take a number, and you want to give it meaning, dress it up. That's what you need to do for simplification. Final point about structuring your presentation. You need to guide the audience. You need to guide the audience. As I was mentioning earlier, you've established your roadmap, you know where you're going, but you need to tell everyone, and you need to make sure that they also follow where you're going. So by guiding the audience, you can make sure that people understand things the way you want them to understand. So this is a slide of a typical sales driver. Basically, you have different quarters on the bottom. You say quarter in Q1, in Q2, in Q3, Q4. These were our numbers. So what do you interpret out of this? Can I get some feedback from someone here? What is your interpretation of this slide?
Positive, it's going up.
Positive, it's going up.
What happened in Q2?
Right. So if I wanted to, me as a presenter, emphasize what happened in Q2, how do I guide the audience? This way. This way I can tell people, I want you to focus on Q2. Or your answer earlier was, things are going well in Q4. This is exactly the difference between the previous slide and this slide, is that I've guided you to have the conclusion that I want you to have from my presentation. So you want to guide your audience. And let me actually give you a little example of how effective it can be to guide the audience. How many people here took the day off to come to attend the conference? Good, 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 good. Well, I asked my boss if I could take the day off. And he said, well, you want the day off, but you only work a day a year, so why should I give you the day off? And I didn't really understand, so he sat me down, and he said, well, listen, 365 days in a year, right? And, well, there's vacation. Vacation, typically people will have 2 weeks of vacation, or that corresponds to 14 days, right? So 365 days in a year minus 14 gives you 351. Keep that in your head, 351 days. But you know what? We work only about 1/3 of the day. Because we work 8 hours, we play for 8 hours, and we sleep for 8 hours. So we only work about 1/3 of the day. So you take 351 days, and you divide that by 3. And you get 117 days. So we're working for 117 days. But don't forget, there are holidays. Holidays. There's 10 days of holidays. At least most of us, I think in Quebec, there are 10 days of holidays. For example, New Year's Day, the day after New Year's. I'm not going to mention them all. There's Canada Day, there's Christmas, etc. There are 10 days of holidays. Actually, I'll just point out something. Journée Nationale des Patriotes in Ontario, that would correspond to the equivalent of Victoria Day, I think. So either way, in Ontario and Quebec, we have about 10 holidays. So 117 days minus 10 days is 107 days. But don't forget, we have sick days as well. So, just to be conservative, we have 2 sick days. Sick days when you're not feeling well, you can't go to the office, or you could call them personal days. Sometimes you just don't feel like going to work. 2 days. So from 107 days, you come down to 105 days. But don't forget, there are the weekends. How many weekends are there every year?
52.
52. That's 52 Saturdays and 52 Sundays. That's a total of 104 weekend days. So 105 days minus 104 leaves you 1 day worked per year. Actually, but before I go to the next point, this is actually an interesting thing because it's almost like a magic trick. And this is actually where I got it from. I got this from a magician. His name is Fred Moore. I was on a cruise recently, and as part of his show, he did this exact thing. And when I came back, I thought, this is amazing. I should put it into my slides because I want to show how you can really guide the audience to bring them to the point where you want to. And so I gave Fred Moore a call. To look him up, I went on the internet, and I realized Fred Moore is also a Toastmaster. He's a Toastmaster at District 84. I told him I was giving a workshop, so he was super nice. He helped me go through the math, and this is what we got. All right, make it visually appealing. This is the second point of my 3-point presentation. This second point is how to make your slides show well. Show well so that people are interested in what you have, or so that people don't get lost. Here I'll cover a few points. One of them is font. The other one is colors, differences, arrows, and images. So font. What do I mean by font? Font size is one of them. The other thing is the typeface. You have serif fonts and you have sans serif fonts, and I'll explain to you what that means. So, font size. Look at this slide and try to see what font makes sense. Perhaps too small? Try to think of that. Try to keep that in mind when you prepare your PowerPoint presentations. And Guy Kawasaki, he was the chief evangelist at Apple. He explained, or one of the calculations that he said about determining font size was try to identify who will be the oldest person in your audience. Take his age, or his or her age, and divide it by 2. So if you have someone, if in this audience there are people who are 70 years old, then maybe a good font size is 35. Don't go smaller than 35. So that's a sort of a good rule of thumb for you to keep in mind. Typeface. We have 2 different sorts of typefaces in fonts. We have sans serif and we have serif. So Arial is an example of a font that is a sans serif font, and Times Roman is something that is a serif font. And you see the difference. The one on the right is a little harder to read. So try to avoid serif fonts, just because visually you'll have more impact when you use fonts like Arial. Colors. Enough said. Actually, one point that you need to keep in mind, and this gentleman here mentioned it earlier, is that when you have slides and the colors don't work, it's probably because the contrast doesn't work. So try to make sure that you have colors that you've chosen wisely. Which one do you think that you can read most easily? The upper one? The lower one, exactly. Why? Because you have a dark color on a light background. That's the key. Dark color on a light background, or you can do the inverse. Have a light color on a dark background. But don't mix. Don't mix, because then it makes it hard to see. So colors, contrast, very important. Differences. I'll have you look at this slide and analyze it a bit. Try to use differences to your advantage. In other words, when you want something to stand out, use differences. But when you don't want something to stand out, don't use differences. So if we go back to my little slide that I had before, I've touched it up a bit. But this is pretty much the same slide that you saw earlier. And what doesn't work here? What doesn't work here? Colors. There's just too many colors. Where do I want people to focus their attention on? That doesn't work here. Same way. Italics. There's text that has italics. There's text that doesn't have italics. So this difference makes it hard for the brain to swallow. Same way, font size. You have a large font, smaller font, an even smaller font, and the smallest font. So when you prepare your slides, try to keep things simple. Try to say, well, maybe if I'm going to use different fonts, I will limit that to 2. Or if I'm going to use different colors, I will limit that to 2. Or if I'm going to use different italics or non-italics, I just need to make sure that I focus the attention on where I want people to focus. Because anytime there's a difference, people will look at the difference, they will see the difference, and they will try to find meaning into it. And if you don't mean to give meaning to the difference, that's when it fails. That's when the presentation fails. So keep those points in mind. Arrows. You may have noticed that in my presentation I have been using arrows, and hopefully this has helped you to see where I'm going every time. So I've now moved the arrow to images. So images. Images are important. This is a typical slide that you'll see. Newly released statistic. Recent research has shown that in this world. Everyone read this?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it could be easier with an image instead. 5 out of 4 people have problems with fractions. Use your Toastmasters skills. This is the final point. Use your Toastmasters skills. And this I'll go over very quickly because you already possess a lot of these skills. First one, don't read slides. Second, eye contact. Third, visual aids. I'll talk about that as well. Make it easy to follow and rehearse. So what do I mean about don't read slides? Have you already ever given a presentation in your Toastmasters club where this was your presentation? Or have you seen other people give a presentation, a speech, and this is how they gave their speech? What was the one comment that was given during the evaluation? Don't use notes. So you know what people have done? They've taken this and they've put it on the computer, and now they are reading the notes. So same thing, don't read notes, don't read your slides. If you have to read your slides, people will say, this is paraphrased from Guy Kawasaki, if you have to read your slides, people will say you're a bozo. Why? Because this bozo is reading the slides, he's reading off the slides, and I can read faster than what he's saying. So that is something absolutely to avoid. Don't read your slides. And this ties into eye contact. Eye contact means don't look at your slide. Maybe you don't need to read it, but don't look at your slide. Look at your audience. Look at your audience. Look at the people here that you're presenting to, because this is the connection that you have. They're here to see you speak, and you're using PowerPoint as a tool for your presentation. The communication that you want to give is you. This is not the communication you want to give. So that's why eye contact is important. And in the same way, turning your back on the audience doesn't work. So eye contact will help to make sure that you avoid this and look at the slide. And what I've done here is I've actually put my laptop on the side. I have the same slides there on my laptop. So I can see exactly what you see. And instead of me having to turn around, I'm looking at the slides very quickly to know where I am, and I can focus on you as my audience. Visual aids. You know, you don't need to use PowerPoint uniquely. And when you give a PowerPoint presentation, don't worry about having other things that you can incorporate. This was a visual aid that I incorporated into this presentation, right? These Post-its are also visual aids that I incorporated. So don't just rely on PowerPoint. You can still go and do other things. If you want to show people how to fold a shirt, actually, no, I'll show it to you afterward. If you want to show people how to fold a shirt very quickly, well, stop writing it into a PowerPoint slide or having images, step 1, step 2, step 3. Bring a shirt and show people. That's the advantage of using visual aids other than PowerPoint. Make it easy to follow. Easy to follow means something as simple as when you want people to focus on you as the audience, turn your screen blank. People will look at you. People will look at you, the attention will be on you, and then go back to the slide. Easy to follow. The magic button on your computer is B. B for black. So if I press B, screen goes black. I press B again, screen comes back on. Thank you. All right? And then final point. For us Toastmasters, it shouldn't be anything new. Rehearse. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Rehearse your presentation, because when you are comfortable with your presentation, you don't need to read your slides. You don't need to turn around and look at your slides. You can focus on the audience, you can focus on your message. So rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. That's the biggest piece of advice that I can give to you, apart from the Post-its as well. So in summary, I've shown you how to put structure into your presentation. I've shown you how to make a presentation visually appealing by using things like fonts, colors, contrast. I've shown you that your Toastmaster skills, your existing Toastmaster skills, can definitely come in handy in making a presentation. You just need to focus on your audience as much as possible. So that was pretty much what I wanted to explain to you. I'll give you a few references as well in case you want to find out more about the art of PowerPoint presentation. Here are some books and links that I could give to you. So for example, Toastmasters. Toastmasters has a technical presentation manual. You could probably find it in the library this very weekend. Look for that. Toastmasters presentation manual will give you tips, will give you pointers, will give you good suggestions on how to prepare a presentation. Another suggestion, David Parody. He's the person that I was mentioning earlier who did this annoying PowerPoint survey. He's the author of 2 books. One of them is The Visual Slide Revolution. This is an example of how you can take a slide or information and through the use of visuals like photos or graphics, how you can really develop it and make it more meaningful. So he has a website, Think Outside the Slide, and I recommend that you go to the website, and that when you get to the website, go to the upper right-hand side. There'll be a little link for YouTube, and go see the YouTube videos, because he has a lot of makeover examples. So he'll say, we start off with this slide, how can we make it better? Step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. And here's the end result. So I encourage you to do that, because I think you'll find it extremely useful. Carmine Gallo, he wrote a book on the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs. And this is a book that I enjoyed glossing through, because it spoke a lot to me as a Toastmaster, because a lot of the techniques that he uses, that Steve Jobs uses, and that Carmine Gallo recommends in his book, are techniques that we as Toastmasters learn. So I definitely suggest this book to you if you want to have a light read and find out how, as a Toastmaster, you can really improve your presentation skills for making PowerPoint presentations. Gar Reynolds. Gar Reynolds is author of Presentations and Design. His site, if you go to garreynolds.com/presentation, you'll have a lot of pointers. A lot of the pointers that I covered this evening, but there are several other pointers that you can look over that can help you to prepare more visually appealing slides and also the theory behind why. And if you really want to go into a lot of detail, basically if you want to make a career out of creating PowerPoint slides, this is the book for you. It's called Slideology. Slideology, the author is Nancy Duarte. She actually helped the former Vice President Al Gore to prepare for the movie An Inconvenient Truth, if any of you saw that. Anyways, so she helped develop the PowerPoints for that presentation. So that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.